We're talking a little Stanford football. Harold Gutmann is with us. He's with the Bay Area News Group, covers the Cardinal. Thanks for doing this today, Harold. Appreciate you jumping on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, let's start, I guess, maybe kind of big picture with Stanford because, we out here in this part of the country, not being in the conference with Stanford, we kind of shift our attention to the Cardinal once a year for the most part. But I mean, after a decade or so of really being nationally prominent, it's the program is just in a much different place right now. How would you kind of describe the state of Stanford football?
Yeah, for sure. It's not good. Uh, like you said, I think the last couple of years, they went 4-8. Then they did pretty well during the COVID year. I think they went 4-2, but then 3-9, and now 1-4 this year. So you're looking at an entire class of players who won't have gone to a bowl game or really experienced a 500 season or any level of success that Stanford has been accustomed to in the last decade under David Shaw. So yeah, it's definitely trending downward. A lot of the things that Stanford used to be known for, power running game, stopping the run, controlling possession, keeping
Yeah.
is not happening. Like their run game has been in the bottom 10 of the FBS in the last few years. It's a little better this year, but they can't stop the run now. They're in the bottom 10 doing that. So, and they're turning the ball over like crazy. So definitely, it's not just that it's going poorly; it's just not at all what people are accustomed to seeing. So it's been a bit
And
of
I
a
mean,
shock.
we're used to seeing, like you kind of said, power offensive lines and running backs like Christian McCaffrey, obviously, and some other guys, who are really good come through there. It seems like they've had decent recruiting classes at least recently. How did they get to where they are right now?
Yeah, it's interesting. The talent level is there. Even at quarterback, I mean, Davis Mills, but he's a NFL quarterback. Tanner McKee is going to be a probably first or second round NFL draft pick. So they've had some NFL level talent for sure. They got some wide receivers playing the NFL right now. Tight ends still are a strong position for them. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, they've definitely. I think a lot of the changes that have affected all the teams in college football seem to hit Stanford harder. A lot of the teams that they're playing now, like for instance, they played USC second game of the season. I mean, USC obviously new quarterback from Oklahoma, like a top receiver from Pitt. They were able to take like 30 some transfers and just really revitalize that squad pretty quickly. With Stanford, just because of the academic requirements, they're not able to take Stanford. They get maybe one graduate transfer a year. They got a safety from Oklahoma, but a lot of the ways that teams improve quickly, Stanford isn't able to take advantage of. So I mean, that's part of it. That's not all of it. Obviously, the downward trend started well before this kind of unlimited transfer and NIL money came in. But
Well,
I think that's definitely part of it.
and that's kind of, Notre Dame is obviously in the same boat. The academics, are at least similar, and that's something that Notre Dame goes through is like it's much easier to get in a grad transfer than it is an underclass transfer. Is I assume is that kind of the same for Stanford? Are they in that same kind of boat?
Yeah, absolutely. They've never had an undergrad transfer, and the grad transfers. I think they've had maybe three in the
Right.
history of the program. And meanwhile, it used to be at least they weren't losing people to the transfer portal because people really want that Stanford degree. But now that's not even the case. Their top two running
Huh.
backs from last year, Austin Jones went to USC, and Nathaniel Pete went to Missouri as
Right.
underclassmen, and that has never happened before. So it's not just that they're not getting people; it's that they're actually losing people.
Yeah. I mean that obviously hurts as well. I mean, assuming some big turnaround from where they are right now this season, this will be a fourth straight year without a bowl for Stanford, and it's year 12 for David Shaw. And it seems like at least coming into the season, most of the stuff that I read says, well, he's safe, for the immediate future. Has that changed at all? Is there a hot seat talk with David Shaw right now?
Yeah, I mean, you might have read some of that from me because I'm one of those people who said he's safe. I think what will
We did.
most likely happen is last year, like I said, they went 3-9 and it was ugly. Like those last seven losses. I know Notre Dame was the last one, but there were a lot of games that they were just not competitive.
Yeah.
And he didn't make any staff changes, no coordinators, no coaches. They were one of five teams, I think, out of like 130 of the FBS who didn't change a single position coach. I think if anything's going to happen, and David Shaw, he's very loyal to his staff. He thinks, if the team doesn't do well, it's not because of the coaching, it's because of scheme or something. But I think if anything's going to change, it won't be David Shaw at the top. I still think he's pretty comfortable, but he might be forced to make some staff changes.
Yeah, I mean, you would think, yeah, if he's safe, you would think that that could be coming next. And
Yeah, I know. I mean, the only reason I say that not because he's doing a bang up job or anything, but if you look at the basketball program, I know we're talking about football, but Jared Haas is entering his sixth year at Stanford, and they haven't made the tournament a single time, and he's still the coach.
Yeah.
So I think Stanford's unlike some other schools that would make changes quickly.
As a Kansas alum who was in school when Jared was still playing, I kind of keep my eyes peeled out there every now and then to see how they're doing. And it's like, man, I wish they were doing a little bit better, but that obviously hasn't quite happened, like you said, either. So, uh, you know, uh, with the exception of the pandemic year, these teams have played every year going back to 1997, and Marcus Freeman called it a rivalry game this week. And I'm curious, does it feel like a rivalry game on that end? Is Notre Dame Stanford, does it feel like a rivalry?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, obviously there's a trophy on the line,
Right?
but with Stanford, they have so many. I guess like every other game, it seems like a rivalry game. Like they have a rivalry with USC. They have like Cal is kind of their natural
Right.
rival. UCLA, and they have all these games that Oregon, like Stanford, Oregon was always, or historically had been in the last 20 years. For the top of the Pac-12 North. So it seems like every other week they're facing a game that could be considered sort of a rivalry. I think they do get up a little bit more for this than maybe like an Oregon State or a Washington State. But I wouldn't say that this is the game that they have circled on their calendar necessarily. Like this is the one that we're looking forward to. But I mean, it is on national TV all the time, every time. So I mean, that is something. It's going to be their longest road trip of the year. So I know they're preparing for that. But
Sure.
and really, at this point, I mean, any game is a big game for them. A chance to break their losing streak.
That's
I
true.
don't think they can be choosy.
That's true. We always see a lot of empty seats, even when Notre Dame does play out there. You mentioned
Yeah.
Cal. I mean, is that basically the game that's a guaranteed sellout, and regardless of what the season happens to be, and everything else is kind of up in the air, I guess?
Yeah, I think so. Cal gets the biggest crowd just because they're just based on proximity and they have a large alumni base kind of in the area. But yeah, the crowd. I mean, people don't go to Stanford for the big game day crowds. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's getting people in the stands has been a struggle. But
Well,
I would say that Cal is probably the biggest crowds, and then Notre Dame and USC are probably next in line, and Oregon. Oregon travels really well too.
sure, that makes sense. We were talking about the future potentially of this series the other day. How important do you think it is on the Stanford end to keep this series with Notre Dame going forward?
Yeah, I think it's really important. It's obviously huge for recruiting in the middle of the country. Like I said, it's a guaranteed national TV spot every time. I mean, they recruit nationally, as does Notre Dame. So I think it's really important to have these rivalries that aren't just based on geography, like not just playing the up West Coast schedule. It's
Right.
important to get out in the Eastern time zone for sure. And like you said, I mean, it is very well attended. It's a high, usually a high caliber game. So I would assume that if Notre Dame would have Stanford, Stanford would want to continue it kind of in perpetuity.
I'm curious with the USC UCLA before the season started, the bombshell that they were going to be going to the Big Ten, and there was talk of Stanford in there and all that. So I guess first, sort of the reaction up there in Northern California and that area you're in to the USC UCLA news, and then anything new along the lines. I haven't heard much lately in terms of Stanford possibly jumping, but I have heard Kevin Warren saying that maybe a couple more teams could be coming in to the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, I think initially we were shocked, like pretty much everyone else. I think people maybe thought USC might be looking, but I think they were surprised that UCLA was going to go just because they're part of the Cal State system, and people thought they would be connected to Cal, and how could UCLA go and kind of abandon Cal? Obviously, they got around that. So, but yeah, I think it was a surprise. I mean, I think if the Pac-12 dissolves, then obviously Stanford needs a landing spot, but I don't think they're looking to go to the Big Ten. It sounds like the Big Ten, if they wanted whoever they wanted, they would have gotten originally. It sounds like so. I think they are kind of holding their fire for a little bit at least. So I don't anticipate any moves kind of in the near future. I know the TV contracts are being negotiated right now. I think once that comes out, that might settle some things down. The expanded playoffs helps. People maybe say, well, do I really want to jump to the Big Ten and maybe be the fifth or sixth best team when the Pac-12 it's wide open? I could be in the playoffs every year if I have a good, a 10-win team. So I haven't, like you said, it's been kind of quiet lately. They seem like Stanford, schools like Stanford would be a good fit academically for the Big Ten.
Sure.
I'm sure if they were invited, they would go if it meant, the Pac-12 just rating them and being rated, and then there would be no more Pac-12. They'd need someplace to go. But yeah, I think just like everyone else, I think they were surprised.
Right.
And sort of just waiting to see what the next steps are. It's
Sure.
pretty wild.
As someone who covers it, how confident are you in the future of the Pac-12 and them staying together?
I think in the short to middle term, like in the next, I think they'll get this next TV contract on maybe like 5 or 6 years, and I think I'm confident that they'll stay together for that long.
Okay.
I think after that, sort of all bets are off. I think,
Yeah.
What this SC and UCLA thing showed is that there's no kind of certainty anymore. And I mean, you mentioned, Stanford and Notre Dame have been playing since '97. I mean, they've been playing USC and UCLA since World War I practically. So obviously that doesn't matter anymore. Geographic, proximity doesn't matter. So I think it would be
True.
kind of foolish to say that anything's for sure, kind of more than 5 years down the line. But I think for the next, through the length of this next TV contract,
Okay.
it should be secure.
All right. Well, as far as this team, like last week, they looked like they were going to end a 9-game Pac-12 losing streak. They're playing Oregon State. They blow a 14-point lead in the second half. How did that just get away from them the way it did?
Yeah, they were actually up to 14 points in the fourth quarter, and they blew that. And it's pretty. I mean, you sort of expect it now, just because the way that the last year plus has gone. I mean, Stanford hasn't beaten FBS team since I think October 2nd, 2021. So we're entering the 54th week of that, and most of those games have not been close. This one was. Yeah, it's sort of just indicative of a lot of things that have gone wrong for Stanford in the last 3 or 4 years that we've been talking about it. They couldn't run out the clock. They couldn't get that last first down. That they gave the ball back to Oregon State. Their defense sort of collapsed at the worst possible time. I mean, they gave up a 55-yard touchdown pass with 13 seconds left. They were kind of out of position. Yeah, I know. I mean, it was sort of, on the one hand, kind of a little bit of a fluky play, like the receiver caught it off the defensive back's helmet, but then the safety was out of position. So it was a little bit of bad luck, but also bad form. So it's why. And then when things start rolling the way that they're rolling, Stanford doesn't really have any game experience to fall back on. Like, this is how we close out a game. Like, this is how we make winning plays. So this just hasn't happened forever.
Right. Well, just looking at them statistically, I mean, there are a lot of lowlights, kind of what, as you alluded to off the top, I guess starting with the offense, they've scored some points, actually. They can score a little bit, but does everything kind of ride on Tanner McKee, the quarterback's shoulders with that offense?
Yeah, for sure. And especially now, I mean, they're down to really one healthy running back. Like I said, the top two running backs transferred in the offseason. And then they actually had EJ Smith, who was Emmitt Smith's son. I'm sure you've heard of him.
Yep.
He was going to start a running back. His first carry was an 87-yard touchdown, first carry of the season. I mean, it was against Colgate, but still that showed some promise. Had, 100-yard game. And then I think after the second week, he was second in the Pac-12 in rushing. And then he suffered a season-ending injury. And so now they're down to really like their fourth string running back. His name's Casey Filkins. I mean, he's a good player, but then there's no depth behind him. And when you think about the Toby Gerhardt, like you said, Christian, I mean, these guys that just carry the ball time and time again, they can't really afford to do that with Casey. He's not really built that way. And so a lot is reliant on the passing game, which is on Tanner McKee's shoulders. Like you said, I mean, they do have some talent there. They have been putting up some points, but then the defense just has been unable to stop the run, get any kind of quarterback pressure. So it's been an issue on that side of the ball.
Well, and I mean, it is amazing looking at the fact that a Stanford team is giving up over 200 rushing yards a game, and they're giving up over 32 points a game as well. Is there anything that defense has that they can hang their hats on right now?
Yeah, their secondary is strong. They should be getting Kyu Blu-Kelly, their top cornerback. He missed last week's game against Oregon State. They should be getting him back. So I'd say the secondary is strong, but like I said, the defensive line, it's young, it's inexperienced. They're kind of getting pushed around. And the other thing is they're just not getting any turnovers. They've only had 2 takeaways all season. I mean, that includes a game against Colgate, which is one of their 2 takeaways. So, it's bad enough that they can't get off the field. They can't stop the run. So it's really like a multitude of issues, as you would expect for a team that's 1-4. Not much going right. And 0-4 against the FBS.
Well, but going back to the fact that they are giving up over 200 yards a game, just watching them a little bit, I mean, they look like they've got guys who are at least similar to, body types and stuff like that. Why are they so bad against the run?
Yeah, they did switch their alignment from last year to this year. They had played kind of a 3-4. They're back to a 4-3, trying to take advantage of some of their personnel, but it's just not working. Yeah, like you said, I mean, they're recruiting the same types of guys. If you look at their roster, it's the same kind of guys, but I don't know if they're not getting coached up. They're not improving from freshman to senior year. They're not able to bring in like added, additional talent.
Sure.
And they've hit a little bit by injuries, not so much on the defense, actually. That's more on the offense. So you can't even blame the injuries. But yeah, I mean, I think that's something that the Stanford coaching staff is really struggling with. So if I had to answer
Yeah.
That would be amazing because I
Yeah.
don't even think Stanford has an answer for that one.
Apparently not, since it
Yeah,
kind of continues week after week.
right.
Well, so Notre Dame's favored by 2 touchdowns. What needs to happen for Stanford to make a game out of it this Saturday night?
Yeah, I mean, they certainly, like I said, they need to start getting to the quarterback. They need to start forcing turnovers because it's not where like if the defense can't stop these drives, like with turnovers with anything like that with sacks, then they're just going to get run down.
Yeah.
I think alternatively, I mean, Stanford, they did have a problem turning the ball over, which was kind of like a double whammy. They had something like 4 turnovers in each of the first 3 games. They kind of cut down on those, so that's good. I mean, they certainly need to win the turnover battle. I know that's kind of obvious.
Yep.
And then, yeah, just get some explosive plays out of the offense and kind of hold on. I don't know. I mean, I think the spread is it's probably an accurate reflection of where these teams are. I think I don't see many ways that Stanford's going to win this game, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that neither one of these teams are forcing turnovers this year. Notre Dame's not forcing them either.
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
Like
I think they're the bottom two.
Like if one of these 2 teams happens to, cause a bevy of turnovers, I think that's a big factor right there. But we haven't seen it, like you said, you haven't seen it from Stanford. We obviously haven't seen it from Notre Dame. So,
Yeah.
All right, Harold Gutmann, he's from the Bay Area News Group, covers the Stanford Cardinal. We appreciate your time. It's not supposed to be too cold here in town this weekend, so
That's
maybe
good.
the
I know
Northern
it's
California
also I know
people
it's a 7:30 kick your time, but it's
Right.
4:30 for Stanford, which is the earliest they've played all season. They had 7:30, 8 o'clock. So I think they're excited for like a slightly earlier start.
used to the late ones by
Yeah,
now.
exactly.
All right. Hey, Harold, I appreciate you doing this. I know you've got a lot going on. Appreciate you jumping on and talking a little Stanford with us. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I hope it's a good game on Saturday. I hope I'm wrong.
Absolutely.